Hello, I'm Craig DeRoche, CEO of Family Policy Alliance. This month, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments in a case that will decide the fate of laws in 23 states about protecting kids from harmful sex change procedures. FDA staff members were there listening to the arguments and participating in a rally in front of the court. We wanted to briefly update you on what happened during the arguments from our own Joseph Kohm. He's the director of public policy at the Family Policy Alliance and coordinated our team's efforts in Washington. He's also producing a series of special podcasts on the topic that we believe you will want to learn more about. We look forward to giving you a preview of what to expect here, and as we continue to fight to help not harm these children in our nation that desperately need our help and protections. Thank you for joining us in this special program, Joseph, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Oh, so am I, Craig. It's a treat to join you, and I appreciate you having me on to talk about this.
Yeah, so this was a pretty big deal. It was December 4th, and our Supreme Court heard oral arguments on this. And everybody vaguely, might remember seeing this in the news. It's been a week or two now. Tell them what was actually going on inside the court. What was the case about?
Absolutely. So this is the first of two cases FPA is going to have before the court in terms of issues that we've worked heavily on and had a big impact on over the past several years. This case is over one of what we would call our help, not harm laws. We wrote the original model policy, model version of this law back in 2017, and it's designed to protect children who are struggling with gender dysphoria, which is discomfort in the sex that God made you as, whether it's male or female, and it's designed to protect those children from predatory medical procedures that don't help them but actually irreversibly harm them. These are transgender surgeries. They're also puberty blockers and cross sex hormones. So we wrote this bill to protect kids from that and give them a method of recourse. And then over the last several years, really very recently, 23 states have passed a version of this bill. It's a dramatic victory. And anyone familiar with FPA, our great supporters out there, will hear us talking about this quite a lot in the past few years. So this case was over two of those state laws. Almost every one of those 23 laws has been litigated by parties like the ACLU on behalf of quote unquote transgender minors. And this case was specifically over the laws in the states of Tennessee and Kentucky. They were separate cases, but because both of those states fall under the same federal circuit court of appeals, they were joined. And the question presented to the court in this case, the overall question is whether states have the right to protect their most vulnerable citizens in this way. But the legal question was simply whether there's an equal protection violation. Equal protection is a part of the Constitution that simply means the government can't discriminate against people for immutable characteristics. And that came up in the oral argument, so I don't want to talk about that now, but I want to summarize that it was the question presented before the court is there an equal protection violation of the Constitution in these laws? That's what was argued last Wednesday.
So that's what drives me nuts, Joseph. I'm not a lawyer, but used to get to write the laws. That's my joke when I was in the legislature, which was a gift. But the truth is, it drives me nuts that our court system doesn't take on the case straight on. It's always with these narrow, to me as a non-lawyer, tangential things. Hey, we have parents and adults performing surgeries and doing these things, and we're going to talk about the 14th Amendment and equal protection rather than the fact that they're removing healthy body parts, giving healthy kids a chronic disease, at 13, 14, 15 years old that will require treatment for the rest of their life. And thank you for pointing that out. This was the Tennessee law. And it in Tennessee has become one of the most important debates of the moment. Who argued the case and what was their approach in the courtroom that day from Tennessee on the not as I pointed out and because you pointed out first the entirety of the issue, which would be simple and which would be desirable for us non-lawyers, but this is an underpinning of the case, a platforming legal basis. Who argued that, and what was their take on that from Tennessee?
Yes. So the respondents in this case were the state of Tennessee. The party in the case was their attorney general, Scrimeti. So the case is United States versus Scrimeti for anyone who wants to go look it up or Google search it or find it on SCOTUS blog. The Tennessee was the party to the case, the respondents being the party that won at the circuit court level. We had a great judgment from the Sixth Circuit on these laws. And arguing for their side was the state of Tennessee's Solicitor General. His name was Matthew Rice. So he argued, actually third in line, because the petitioners that were being represented by the Biden administration was Joe Biden's Solicitor General. She was then followed by a representative from the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU. And what they tried to argue is that this law discriminates against Tennessee citizens on the basis of sex. And we thought they might argue it discriminates against so-called transgender individuals, but I think they wisely avoided that strategy because the court would be inventing a whole new class of protected people under the Constitution, under the American civil rights laws. And instead, they tried to argue for sex discrimination. But even that became very muddled, Craig, because the question, I mean, I think Justice Alito really got to the heart of it when he started asking about the idea of an immutable characteristic. Usually, that's what determines whether there's been discrimination involved, is whether the action in question, the law itself, discriminates against someone for a characteristic of theirs that they cannot change. So, for example, a racial minority, a member of a racial minority group like an African American, cannot choose not to be African American, just like I can't choose not to be Caucasian. Or if it discriminates against a man and a woman, because until 5 minutes ago, we believed men and women could not decide suddenly, I don't want to be a man. And Justice Alito got to this very incisively by saying this is not an immutable characteristic, or drawing out that transgenderism is not an immutable characteristic in his question via his questioning, because someone could be transgender 1 minute and someone could be transgender the other minute. And what I loved about what Matthew Rice responded to this was, the Solicitor General tried to argue, and she even did this in her closing argument. She tried to say,
This is the email that you sent out, right?
yeah,
Where you were saying, "Now this is interesting, folks. I just wanted to draw attention to what you're gonna say right here." Go ahead. Keep going, Joseph.
Yeah, sure. So she, in her closing argument, she finished by saying, and keep in mind, this Biden administration Solicitor General is bringing this case on behalf of a quote unquote transgender child, several transgender children who have joined in this suit. And she's specifically referencing here a young woman with gender dysphoria who believes she is a man. So this is the Solicitor General's words, not me. She says, he, being this young woman, can't have these treatments because of his birth sex. And that is not correct fundamentally. This person cannot have these treatments under the law because he is underage. He can't consent to these lifelong, irreversibly harmful procedures, and because they are, in fact, harmful. Harm is the line where medical care ends. Medical care, by definition, is helpful, not harmful. That's why FPA began this movement, because we know that no child is born in the wrong body. God never made a throwaway person, and he never made a mistake when he put you into either a male or a female body. And that's what these laws were written from the basis of, is that these kids cannot consent to this and that these treatments are actually harmful.
And Joseph, thank you so much for making that clear, putting the pin on it for our team here and our listeners. And many of our listeners know that I'm in recovery for addiction. And I tried to solve my problems in high school and actually junior high school by doing drugs and alcohol to get away from my problems. Other kids choose violence. Kids choose sex. Choose gambling or pornography, all sorts of things. So it makes sense that people would get wrapped up in this. Hey, maybe I can change my gender to escape the problems that we all share, which are, anger, fear, guilt, shame, pride, and rather than name a month after it and celebrate it, Family Policy Alliance and our leaders, like Joseph Kohm, our policy director, is in there trying to recognize and get our public to recognize that every child needs help and protection, not harm. So I really want to appreciate and say that um, that's being lost, Joseph, on a lot of people on the right, that are talking about this. They think that they think that this is a separate issue from, say, a parent buying their kid anabolic steroids to make the varsity football team, or buying them alcohol to become more popular and throwing booze parties. And that's the point you're trying to make here. Those are harmful. decisions that a parent would make for it, and really not to put too soft of a point on it, really preying on their child's childhood. The child's a defenseless child. They haven't been formed well enough yet in their brains to know that that's a shortcut that's going to have permanent, potentially damaging effects to them. You do drugs and alcohol underage, or to use anabolic steroids to make a varsity team. Like, we saw the public react to parents sanctioning cheating to get into college a few years ago, and it seems so clear to me, Joseph, that people understand parents should not have a fundamental right to harm their children either. But was that part of the discussion, or is that for a future court case?
Yeah, great question, Craig. That the question of parental rights was raised in the appeal at the circuit court level. So those would be the two questions surrounding this law, which is one of equal protection and one of parental rights, which have a long and really celebrated history of protection under the Constitution, under the laws of our country and our states. The Supreme Court declined to hear the parental rights question in this case. And I think that was appropriate because the overall question of parental rights in relation to the relatively recent dramatic success, unfortunately, of the LGBT movement is a much broader one than what's specifically at issue in this case. But we obviously get that question all the time when we go into state houses and we argue for a help not harm bill like this is, you're an organization that says you support parental rights, but what about in this context? And the answer is that parental rights have always ended where harm begins. Craig, you are so right to bring up an example like alcohol or like giving steroids to your kid or helping them cheat. These are all harmful things. And that's why the real question at the core of this issue of transgender procedures for kids is whether they are in fact helpful or harmful. And we, as Christians, we're so lucky or so fortunate and blessed that we have a leg up. We know ahead of time that they're harmful. The broader scientific community is still coming to terms with this, but they are coming to terms with it. And once the scientific community rightly understands that these are not helpful, they are in fact harmful. The research is mounting and building up to show that. Well, then the issue really fixes itself, I think, and it's why I'm very, very optimistic for the future of it.
Well, it's unfortunate that it's taking a mounting evidence and research. As a parent, I just this is this is my commentary, Joseph. I guess I'm allowed to riff a little bit on this. Um, nobody tried to say that Quaaludes and mescaline, or the drugs I was taking along with alcohol in junior high school, was my identity, and the government should give that to me for free. Because it's my truth, and all the rest of it. It just people have lost their minds, and I think it's related to who's funding political campaigns and advertisements on television within the pharmaceutical company. But that's a different issue. Back to the issue at hand. You were there. This is what I want to celebrate. Our Family Policy Alliance, because of your support, putting us, right there in the middle of so many issues of the day, where we can serve the Lord and we can help those that are in elective office do their jobs. I say we don't try to get the elected officials to change their values for us at Family Policy Alliance and our family policy councils in 40 states. We're here to help them live out the values that they already have, that Jesus put in their heart, which is hard because the evil one, the prince of this world, is fighting and filling them with fear and pride and guilt and shame and anger about their keeping their job, and so they get wrapped up in these lies, and that made for a interesting scene that day. And we have the privilege of you actually being there, Joseph. And I can't really overstate how privileged that is for our organization to be one of the very few organizations, not a lot of room at the Supreme Court, inside and outside that building. Tell us what you saw.
Yeah, that boy, that's the most encouraging thing I think about that experience last week, Craig, is how diverse the coalition was that is seeing this for what it is, this truth about the harm this does to kids, and came out on a very cold, below 30-degree morning in Washington D.C. to rally in support for them. I was there with our great director of government affairs, Dylan Jeremiah. Several of our state family policy councils were there as well. But the coalition was so broad, everything from other LGB groups, plus medical ethics organizations. And there was a counter rally, which I think is important to talk about. I'm going to just give two examples from that counter rally, since you brought up very astutely the parents earlier, Craig. Um, there were two parents I wanted to draw examples to, and I'm not speaking out of turn here because they both went viral on the internet. So you people can go out and find these and verify what I'm saying. The first was a parent that agreed to be interviewed on camera by a friend of FPA and a brilliant young reporter named Mary Margaret Olahan for the Daily Wire. And she asked this woman, I mean, they go on for about 5 minutes, but the crux of her questioning that made this woman and the video go viral was she asked the woman, so if you allow your transgender son, mean biological girl, to transition, and she has a double mastectomy, and then later on in life she comes to you and asks you why you let her do this. Now I can't breastfeed my children. The mother responds with, "Well, I think I have bigger things to worry about right now." Now, understandably, the reaction to this on the internet was one of scoff. But I wanna give an alternative a take on it to our audience, which is, imagine if we take her seriously. I think there's good reason we should consider taking this parent seriously. One has to ask in response, what could possibly be more important than her daughter's ability to have children and breastfeed them later in life? And the answer can only be her child's life itself. And therefore, I think this parent is representative of the emotional blackmail that is being perpetrated on parents and gets them in this bubble to where they could respond to questioning in this way. They are being told that it's better for them to have a living son than a dead daughter. The implication being that if they do not go along with these predatory procedures and these lies, that their child is going to commit suicide. And that was one of the other great revelations that came out in the oral arguments was, one of the justices got the other side to admit in the questioning and on the record that these treatments do not prevent suicide. Now, the other side tried to split hairs here, and in a really, I think, insidious way. They made a distinction without a difference. They tried to say that this treatments reduce suicidality, but not completed suicide. And eventually, you can hear it in their voice if you listen to the recording. They say, "All right, Your Honor. These treatments do not actually reduce completed suicide." And not only is that a very insidious attempt at fake nuance, but it's also deeply insulting to anyone who actually does struggle with self harm urges and gets treatment for them. And I'm one of those people, Craig. I used to struggle with this years ago. And by the grace of God and through help of people that cared about me, I got treatment and I got healed. But that was a vulnerable time in my life. And for the Solicitor General and the ACLU attorney to argue that was deeply insulting to people struggling with this and really duping to the parents like that one Mary Margaret spoke to. The other parent, and I'll be quick about this, that's really revealing for what's out there is the actress Annette Bening. She's the wife of famed actor Ned Beatty. She's an accomplished actress in her own right and puts herself out there as a parent of a trans kid. And the quote from her that made her go viral on the other side's rally, where they had a podium set up too, was having a trans kid has made me a much more interesting person. And this illustrates the other kind of parents that get caught up in this, the parents that are really leaned into it and are quite shameless about it. We like to, those people I work with on this issue like to joke and call what she has Transhausen by proxy, which is a wordplay on the medical diagnosis Munchausen by proxy, which simply means that you are the caretaker of someone who you put out there as ill or hurt, who really isn't, and you do it to get attention. And though that was really the only diversity on the other side is those two parents, one who's been emotionally blackmailed and one who is really all in as an activist. And that's what we're up against, folks. And it's why this parental rights question will ultimately have to be resolved by the court.
Well, I'm gonna show my age here. I'm not smiling about what you just said. I'm smiling because I'm old enough to know that you've married to Warren Beatty, not Ned Beatty, but, Annette Bening, imagine that, a Hollywood actress that makes her childhood's health and life about herself. Shocked, Joseph, that you're bringing us, that news, but, folks, this is what it's about, and that's why Family Policy Alliance, we take this stuff so seriously. You've just heard of our director of policy and his struggles and how Lord has helped him with that, and I as the CEO, and other people are out there talking in a very condescending way. They're talking in very harmful ways of themselves about what they want to eliminate or chop off or, these parents ought to be incarcerated, blah, blah. There's a bunch of people, and I want to say something. I've said it on this show before. People know that I worked in prison reform for 10 years for the late, great Chuck Colson. And I learned this from prisoners that hurt people. And a lot of times we think that's just a child, but if you can remember the grips of your first love or your desire to make that varsity football team, or when you were humiliated powerfully in front of dozens of people, what that made you feel about your identity and the rest of it. These children are hurt, but a parent, the parents that I had, with all their faults, knew that my learning how to navigate that what was part of growing up. Those painful lessons are what we needed to have as a foundation to be successful in this world. That's a fundamental part of parenting. And if you eliminate those lessons, if you hurt your child rather than help them in those intervals, your child's growth is stunted forever at that point. I believe that. That's a Craig DeRoche saying, and we you freeze them in time until they at some point later become motivated enough through pain usually to have the willingness to revisit that. So there's a lot at stake, and that's what we're seeing at full display here, folks. Can you imagine? And maybe that's what's next if America doesn't turn the corner here. That that people say, "But my kids said that they were going to run away." If I didn't do this for them, and we start just opening up for everything else, that every time a kid says they're gonna run away, their parents says, "Well, I gotta do that," and that's to the blackmail. Joseph, I'm not being flippant. I know you know that, but I wanna put these in, for our audience. If you're listening to my voice and saying these things, I want you to know that this is the time for you to find your voice in your local church, in your, in your, social networks where you are. This is not the time to go along and get along like parents have done for 70 years. It's time for you to say you disagree with this, if you disagree with it. It's, time for you to learn more of what we're saying here at Family Policy Alliance so we can equip you with the analogies and the metaphors and the words and the facts so you can help change the narrative in our culture. This is evil being permeated through lies, and it is collecting thousands and thousands of kids before they even have a chance at puberty, and giving them chronic diseases. If there isn't anything else that our local church could stand up for, heaven help us. So, Joseph, we only have another minute here, but how can our audience be doing, more? How can they learn more? I'll just be really brief. I was going to ask you about this, but I know the answer. We're not going to hear about the outcome of this until June or July from the Supreme Court. But this debate is going to rage until then, and it's going to rage after that. So, as a policy director, the author of these bills, I want to say it's not a prideful statement, it's a grateful statement. Family Policy Alliance is where the origin of these protective bills came to be created. It's through our statesman graduates that they've been advanced over the vetoes of 6 governors. And they've been advanced in a bipartisan fashion in every single one of these 23 states. To say that this is a Republican or even a Christian issue is a lie. This is a common sense issue and it's a moral issue, Joseph. We know that. But what can we be doing between now and then? What would you be encouraging parents to do today?
Yeah, great question, Craig. Well, the first thing I can say is if you're not involved with your state FPC, you really should be. They're the state organizations that really helped us, really did the frontline work in their state houses to get these bills passed. You can find them at familypolicyalliance.com/allies, which I'm sure we can link to in the show notes. There's one in over 40 states, but they're the ones who you can sign up for their newsletters, get involved with them, use your voice in the state capitol because that's who state legislators want to hear from is people like you, their actual constituents they serve, and it does make a difference. So that's number one. Number two is to use your voice elsewhere, whether it's in your day-to-day life with your coworkers, in your churches, your small groups, your Rotary clubs, anything, even social media. We encourage you to speak out about this because the two issues that FPA has gotten before the Supreme Court this year are issues that thrive on lack of awareness. So this is one of them. This is why the rally was so important. It's why it was so great for us to have so many detransitioners like the great Chloe Cole speak out at that rally because they've been through this. They've come out the other side. They've lived through it. They've come to terms with who God made them and they're using their voice. If they can do it, so can you. The other issue is like that as well. In January, the court's going to hear a case over a law in Texas requiring age verification to access online pornography in order to protect kids from pornography. We're going to do a lot of messaging on this case. We're going to do our part to raise awareness and speak out about that with a limited podcast series in the next several weeks coming out leading up to that case. And then we're going to speak out in the months that as we wait for a decision, probably in June, on both of these cases. But both of these issues, again, the threat of the pornography industry and the overall sex industry, which is trafficking and prostitution, they all thrive on lack of awareness of how truly evil and damaging they are to our society and to individuals. So my encouragement to people is follow us so you can get equipped for what to talk about, and then go and talk about it in your day-to-day lives, because bringing what's done in the dark into the light is how everyone, every member of the body of Christ and every citizen makes a difference on these two issues.
Thank you, Joseph. Thank you for being with us. And folks, thank you for being here for this show. You created this. As I said, you gave us the opportunity to protect already hundreds of thousands of children that are being exposed to this. If you don't think it's in your schools, you're absolutely wrong. My local schools, very conservative, said it didn't exist, only to find out from multiple teachers, my children, friends and family members, it's permeated all of our society, even probably in private schools. So this is something that we all need to be engaged in. Please join us at familypolicyalliance.com, where you can learn more. Follow us on our socials, which are linked here. We're getting breaking news there faster than anywhere else these days. And folks, if you want to support this, we have a lot of work to do next year. This is about 23 states. We have 50 states in America and the District of Columbia. We need your help. And right now, we have a generous donor that's given us a $500,000 to continue this fight. And anything that you donate or contribute to us will be matched. Will be matched. You'll be able to double your gift right now if you want to help children. These are children in need of people like you. They're not getting the help from their parents, obviously. And so please, we need you to help us help them. And last but not least, we are leading the movement in America to stop voting once every 4 years in the general election for president and starting to vote 4 times every 1 year. Because, folks, we can complain all we want about Caesar, but the truth is in America, we are Caesar. We own the country, we own the state, we own the school district, we own our city entirely. Nobody else owns it. It's not a percentage that we own it entirely. And Christians are not voting. And if we voted 4 times every 1 year, if they're voting on sidewalks, we should vote on sidewalks and make our influence known. We pray first, we vote and engage. This is about civics, not about the issues. That's downstream. And you can learn more about that by coming to Family Policy Alliance or Christians Engage. We want you to check that out. We want to transform our country for the good so we don't have to get ourselves wound up on things like this transgender issue in the future. When Christians participate, that is the solution. God bless you all and Merry Christmas, and we'll see you real soon.